up guys, this is the KTM Duke 125. It's the spawn of the beast, the entry-level Duke from KTM. And it's the 125 that I think everyone wants or wanted at some point. So we've been riding this for a week just to see how good it is. So let's get into the review. What's this KTM Duke 125 all about then? So for 2024, we've got a few new bits thrown in. Now KTM, starting from the front, have added a whole new light cluster and it looks really, really good on the road. When you're driving around in the sort of dusk time, you can actually see how much time and effort KTM have put into the light unit. Not only does it look nice, but it lights up the road fairly well as well. Moving back from that, you've got a brand new 5-inch TFT Dash. Quite fun to use really. The new joystick pad here is really just straightforward. Up, down, back and enter. So you can go in there, you can change your rider modes, you can do a few bits there. You can even go into the speed limiter if you want to set a top speed limit, and more on that later. Moving slightly backwards, and I suppose the whole bike really, they've got a brand new frame for 2024. And this 125 Duke shares the same frame with the 390 Duke. So that does give it that big character on the road and that big feeling. So when you're on this bike, you feel like you're riding a much bigger bike than just a 125. Of course, you've got the LC4C engine. It's rated for 14.7 brake horsepower and about 11.5 Newton meters of torque. The big question that I'm sure everyone is wondering is how much is it? So KTM listed this bike at the sort of reveal and release at £4,899. I had a word with KTM and they said that they're doing a special summer offer that's going to be prolonged. So they don't have a necessary end date for that. And for the 2024 models, that brings the price down by £500. So around about £4,399 for this Duke 125, which is a very good price. And it brings it quite far under that premium price tag. So naturally, the KTM Duke has that Duke flair, and the flair that KTM are very famous for. Of course, on this 2024 model, your rear shock is mounted off center, and that just gives it a nice visible appearance where you see the shock. It's WP Apex suspension front for the forks and rear for that shock as well, with preload adjust on that shock. But ultimately, this KTM Duke is an absolute monster, and it certainly looks the piece. But when you get on the road, does it feel like this spawn of the beast that they say it is? So at the heart of the beast, you find the LC4C motor. Of course, it's single cylinder and it's liquid cooled, of course. Now there's quite a few bits to talk about on this motor. I mean, number one, 15 kilowatt or 14.7 peak power. It revs up to around 10,000 RPM and it's got 11.5 Newton meters of torque. So let's see what the KTM Duke 125 sounds like. And I will have to say as well, there's a Remus accessory exhaust on here. And I believe it's about £634.20, something like that. So initially, it's an underslung exhaust hidden away underneath the bike. But if you want to pay for it, you can pay for it. Looks quite nice. Let's see if it sounds nice. Let the fuel go in. Sounds okay. It's a little bit muted, and this is in track mode as well, which gives you a different display on the dash. Just doesn't sound quite as raspy and throaty as I was expecting and hoping for, but it sounds okay, I guess, just a little bit quiet. Now, whether that's emissions, and because it meets the Euro 5.2 emissions, it might just be that this motor feels like it has a little bit more potential, but they've just throttled it down just to make sure that it doesn't get a little bit too leery. Now, it's quite funny that the marketing for this bike was with the campaign, no BS. But then it feels like they've had to put up with quite a lot of BS to get this motor on the market. It's still fun to ride. It still has that little bit of torque, but I just find that the gearing is really short in first, second, and third. You get to 30 miles an hour when you're just sort of pushing on a little bit, and that's in third gear. Once you get to 30, the indicator, or the suggested shift up indicator, starts to flash at you around about 6,000, 7,000 revs in third gear. Then you switch into fourth and it's fine, and it's a lot longer in fourth, but it just means that when you're then taking corners, it feels like your bike is shouting at you to shift up, shift up, shift up. Of course, that is a 125 characteristic, but it just feels like this engine has a lot of potential and doesn't quite meet it. So it has a ride-by-wire throttle, it's got an assist and slipper clutch, so you can get a little bit active when you're riding around on this. And the top speed, at least for me when I've been riding it, under its own steam, flat level ground, no wind, is about 66 miles per hour. Now I am 6'3", and I am maybe 14, 15 stone, I haven't measured myself lately. But that is quite under the 70 limit that I was hoping for. Now it's enough to, of course, overtake a lorry and sit in the left lane of a dual carriageway, but it just leaves me wanting a little bit more. That 70 miles per hour figure is what I would expect a 125 that's liquid cooled and up there with the premium bikes to be able to achieve. This just feels like it falls short a little bit, and it could be, again, because of those emission standards. So are emissions killing off the air and liquid cooled single cylinders? Because if they're pumping out too much emissions, they can't work at the maximum potential that they could be working for. Your guess is as good as mine. So to me, a Duke is mostly, if not all, about handling and just that characteristic road feel that the Duke family go for. Of course, as a 125, you're going to expect it to be quite lightweight, and it is. I've got it listed at 154 kilograms wet. When you're on the road, it does feel incredibly nimble and light. Of course, when you start throwing a bike side to side, when you go into corners, it almost feels too light. It feels like if you go into a corner too eagerly, the bike just will wash away from underneath you because it just feels like there's nothing underneath you whatsoever. In terms of suspension travel, you have WP Apex forks up front, which are non-adjustable, but they're upside down. They look really, really nice. And you've got this big rear shock here from, of course, WP Apex as well. Now you can adjust the preload on the rear, but as it came to me, it was pretty nifty and really good on the roads. I would suggest, if you were to take one of these bikes on the road, rather than go to the dual carriageway, just always go the fun route. Go down the country lanes, go down the ones where you can have a little bit of fun and open the bike up full throttle, because the handling on this is superb. Now the seat height is a little bit lower here. It's 800mm for this year. I believe you can get an accessory seat that's a little bit taller, so about 820. So for me, at 6'3", I can happily get my feet on the ground, no problem at all. Moving to the brakes are quite responsive and quite nice. There's a little bit of lacking of initial bite, but because it's a 125 and they are Brembo calipers at the front and the rear, just think that they've made it a bit softer for the initial rider, someone who's maybe jumping onto a bike for the first time. You don't need to have extremely sharp brakes until you know really what you're doing. The brakes up front, Brembo, you've got a really big 320mm disc and you've got a 4-piston Brembo caliper on there. And the rear disc is 240mm and you've got a 2-piston caliper on there, which is very, very interesting for any bike. Usually it's just 1 piston, but 2, let's go. And last up, contributing to that road character and feel, you've got a 17-inch front and rear tyre and you've got Michelin Road 5 hoops on there. Very sticky, and even when the bike is just firing up for the first time and it's a little bit cold in the morning, you do have quite a lot of faith in those tyres, especially when you start getting heat into those. Feels like they hold a lot of heat nicely, and you can trust them in the corners where hopefully you'll be spending a lot of time on this thing. And a quick shout out goes to Lexham Insurance, who power Bike Matters. If you're looking for a 125cc scooter, motorcycle, or just any insurance quote, if you head directly to the Lexham Insurance website at lexhaminsurance.co.uk, get a quote today and see if we can beat your renewal or current premium. The tank size is 13.4 litres, and when you fill it up, it will give you your range remaining on the dash, which is really nice. It's really clear and visible. I believe that you can get around 200 miles range out of this tank, which is pretty good going, but of course it is a 125 and they are known as frugal machines, especially this one with a very frugal LC4C motor inside it. Now, one thing I did want to mention about the dash as well, this TFT screen, though it is very nice to look at from this angle, when you look at it from the front, it just looks a bit garish. It looks like it sticks out quite a lot. Now you could put a screen here to, of course, help you when you're riding, get a little bit more aerodynamic flow over your helmet. But it just feels like the front of this bike is then going to be quite elongated. It's really sharp to look at, and the way that the bike fits that nice sharp curvature, of course, the scalpel Duke dynamic that we all know and love, it would be kind of ruined by a screen, I think. But in any case, the TFT Dash is very nice and it's very good to ride with, but it just looks a little bit weird from the front, in my opinion. But a lot of TFT Dashes do, unfortunately. Right, let's do a little deep dive on the KTM Duke 125 menu on the brand new TFT Dash. Quite a lot to look at here, to be fair. First thing you see here is ride mode. You've got street and track, nice and easy. ABS, road or supermoto. Can't recommend using supermoto on the road, of course, but it'll be a lot of fun. Speed control is a new feature on this bike as well, and this is basically going to allow you to put a speed limit onto the bike. So you can ride about as you'd like to, but you can then get to maybe 30 miles an hour and not exceed that limit, which is interesting to see because I think KTM have already put a speed control on the bike without telling you. You skip over the two indication buttons there, which is the map and music, because you can pair your phone, which is down here in the connectivity menu. And if you do that, then as I say, you can get maps and you can get your music all through the TFT Dash. So if you're into that, that's a good option. Favorites is going to be what you see on the bottom of the TFT, which is all good. Quick shifter plus, if you've got it, you can then make sure that it's switched on here. And the shift light is what I was saying, when it gets to around 4,000 to 5,000 revs, it will glow orange to you and beg you to shift up. You can't actually change that when you haven't ridden 600 miles yet. So no doubt trying to make sure you don't run the engine in too heavily. But we've done about 500 miles total, well, 475 total on this bike. But that's the TFT Dash, as quick as possible. Very nice looking unit and nice and bright. Happy days. Now, if you remember back a few months ago, we had this KTM Duke 125 at number 2 in our top 10 motorcycles that are 125cc for 2024. Click up there if you want to see the other 9 competitors. Does this Duke deserve to be number 2 in that 125cc list, having now ridden this bike? And I'd say potentially, but there is some good options out there. So what do I mean by that? Well, this bike is stunning to look at. And now that it's been reduced in price by around about £500, so £4,399 as of releasing this video, as far as I'm aware. There's also a 1% finance deal, which is outrageous. If you go through the KTM dealership for the APR finance, I'm not sure exactly what the monthly figures would be, but if it's 1%, oof, that's a great deal. Anyway, this bike has the Duke heritage, DNA, style, and I believe that this is a very, very nice looking 125. The only thing that is letting it down a little bit in my eyes is the engine. It's fine to ride with, don't get me wrong. You can still get up to 60 miles an hour quite happily. And on the road, you can really full throttle action and just go everywhere you want and have a great time ultimately. But if you're a 125 rider with maybe an A2 license, I would be maybe considering the 390 Duke, because it's the exact same framework and it's effectively the same bike, but with a bigger engine. Now, when you look at this 125 Duke against the rivals, because of that now price increase, this becomes one of the cheaper premium models out there at £4,399. If you look at, say, maybe the MT125, the CB125R, maybe even the GSX-S 125 or the Tuono 125, you've got so many options there that fit that premium category that are around about £5,000. Because of this price being lowered, that does make it far more appealing. If it was, say, the same price as the other rivals on the market, you would have to then really think if you're after this Duke DNA, or if you maybe want to go for an MT125, which is famously a very, very good bike. This Duke does do the business, but I'm just very upset that the emissions are seemingly bringing down the character and the quality from the 125cc market, because we're already working with, say, 15 brake horsepower as a peak figure. If it now feels like it's lowering that because the revs can't go as high and the power can't be as high, I feel like the 125cc market is losing that tiny little bit of charm. Still very fun to ride, but if only they had a little bit more power and the emissions gods weren't against us. In any case, let me know down below in the comments what you think about the Duke 125, what you think about emissions, and if the air-cooled motor is going to be ultimately killed off because emissions gods don't want them around anymore. Be very curious to hear what you think about that. Of course, check out our social medias and see if there's anything that you like on there. Always love to engage with you guys on social media. And until then, like the video and I shall see you on the next one. Ciao.